So, to develop your plan, you initiate your project and then figure out what part of your company is going to be covered by your business continuity plan. Then you have to decide how long you could live without each part of the business, which tends to lead to some internal political trouble as people said, wait a minute, my department is important. What do you mean you can live without me? And then you identify your controls, have a strategy, and so you initiate this way, you decide you're going to do it, you do a business impact analysis to decide how critical the systems are, develop your controls and plans to recovery, and a way to move things to other servers or other locations temporarily. And then you're going to have to test your plan, train people, and have exercises like fire drills where they practice. And you're going to have to maintain and update your plan because everything keeps changing. So if you don't keep updating it, there'll be important things that you added that aren't included. So this is just a chart that shows all these steps as you go through those similar steps to get it all going. And of course, management has to support it. This is something they bring up many, many times in the CISSP training. If you want to do anything related to security, the first thing you have to do is convince somebody at the top of management that it's worth doing, and then they will allocate resources to make it happen, which is why, I want you to do these presentations and practice explaining something in a few minutes, because you have to convince management to go along with it or it's not going to happen. All right. And so your project manager will be the person to make sure this is all happening. They have to have authority and good organizational skills. They don't need great technical skills. That's what the technicians are for. Our management skills are what they need to get everybody to go along with the plan. And so you make a team, you have a continuing continuity planning team with representatives of all the stakeholders, human resources, public relations, IT, physical security, line managers. Make sure everybody's involved, otherwise you'll make some plan that hurts somebody, and when you deploy it, they'll say, wait, you ruined the stuff I need. This used to happen at a company I worked at. They would bring in the IT team on the weekend. We would come in on Monday. There'd be beer bottles in all the trash cans. They would have upgraded the network and nothing worked because they didn't have anybody there that actually tested to see if the applications we needed still worked. They would fix the network so they could ping end to end and say, there, it's fixed, but they would have broken something important. And you don't want to do that. You have to make sure somebody's there from every major part of the company. So you decide what assets you're going to protect, what emergency events you're going to consider, and so on, and what resources are needed. That's the scope. And then you assess how critical each part of the company is, how long could you survive an outage in various portions of it. That's your business impact analysis. And so then you have risk assessment, for example, for email, server room being unlocked, what would happen. Unauthorized people might enter. That would cause the following business impact analysis. You'd lose the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your server room. So to mitigate it, you put in better locks. If your software is out of date, you know what that could happen and cause a cyber attack, so you update the software. You got no firewall. That's you move your server to, say, managed hosting. That would put it behind somebody else's firewall. These are example risk assessments for email systems. You do things like that. Yeah. And so recovery point objective is the amount of data loss you can withstand. So if you back up every night, then you might lose up to one whole day of data because you might be work till 5 p.m. and have everything crash and all you have is last night's backup. Recovery time objective is how long it takes to actually perform the backup, another issue. And then there's work recovery time, which is the sum of those two, is the total amount of time it's going to take to recover a system. First, it takes as long as it takes to recover from backup, and then you have to redo all the work to bring you from backup up to the current time. That's why companies sometimes switch to continuous backup all the time over the internet. All right, so mean time between failures is your estimate to how long between failures of your equipment. Mean time to repair is a similar thing. And your minimum operating requirements are the requirements you need to keep your stuff going. Supply chain management is a huge issue these days. The pandemic really brought to life in America how critical our supply chains are. When we were no longer getting regular shipments from China, all kinds of things. There wasn't enough toilet paper. People couldn't get the stuff for their factories. It made it visible how much our supply chains were not secure enough. And so your communications may fail, so you might have to go to satellite phones or wireless networks or something to reach your people and your suppliers and your customers and so on. And all your required utilities have to be there. All these might fail. I had a time when my students visited the PG&E emergency response. Maybe it was AT&T. They had trucks they could drive. It was AT&T. They had trucks they could drive into a hurricane zone, and they had set up a cell phone network in the middle of a disaster. They had one truck that had like a generator for all the power, and another truck that had all the equipment, and another truck that had like rooms and food and water for the staff, so they could just go into a vacant lot and within like a few hours have a cell phone station. So here's the types of recovery strategies you might have. If you have no planning at all, then that's very cheap but not very available. When bad things happen, you're going to have a long period of downtime. And then there's cold, warm, hot, and redundant sites in increasing expense and that recover faster. So a redundant site is where you have another whole site with everything all set to go. So this one can go down and that other one can just instantly take over. A hot site is where the equipment's ready, but it might take an hour to load the data from backup tapes. A warm site has like the old equipment that you moved away from, so it's going to take a few days to bring it up. And a cold site has nothing much. It just means you have the place and it's going to take weeks to bring it up. And of course, these are cheaper, but you have more downtime as you move over. You might have a reciprocal agreement to work with another company and use their servers for a while. You could have a mobile center like I was describing on wheels. You could outsource things to other companies, so you rely on their disaster recovery plans. And so the audit plan's business continuity plan addresses your business processes. Your business recovery or resumption plan is how you recover immediately after disaster. Community of operations is particularly focused on the IT assets. Continuity support, crisis communications, incident response plan, disaster recovery plan, and occupant emergency plan. We've talked about these. All right. And so here's the very related ones. Continuity support plan covers IT only. Your incident response plan, of course, we talked about security incidents like viruses and attacks. And occupant emergency protects your people. And crisis management plan is coordinates among your managers. So that's going to have a way to communicate, so you actually provide useful information instead of rumors. Call trees, so you can have employees call other employees so you can quickly inform all of them of something important like don't come into work because the place is flooded. And you have a command post and some kind of copy of vital records stored off-site so you don't lose them. And, of course, succession planning. The military is great about this. The military totally knows if somebody gets shot who immediately steps up to take over. Most companies don't have that. I remember a company I worked at had one guy that had to approve this and one guy had to approve that. And when that guy was on vacation, it all just stopped waiting for that one guy to come back because they didn't have any effective succession planning. Anyway, all right, so let's look at another Kahoot. And I see what Yuri said, bickering is the byproduct of open source. And I think it is. Open source doesn't usually have a clear boss or a clear plan or anything. And, that's why I'm a fan of capitalism. I think if you want something to work, you actually have to make a business plan. So you actually make some money and pay people. That's how you make things really work. Things running with volunteers is a temporary, short-term thing. Anyway. All right. All right, which value measures the maximum time needed to recover systems? That's recovery time objective. All right. Which recovery option takes an hour to implement, typically? That's a hot site. Everything's all ready to go. You just need to like add some backup tapes or something to it. All right. Which process use another organization's data centers? All right, that's reciprocal agreement. Good. All right, and which plan protects human life? A high priority for most companies. Only the military is allowed to decide that they can sacrifice some lives to get their job done. The rest of us protect human life. That's the occupant emergency plan. All right. All right. Good. All right, I think we can do the last one here. Just caught up. So, all right, backups and availability. Continuous availability is, of course, the best if you have no, all right, you can get your maximum. All right, guys, you'll have to be quieter back there. All right, so if you have continuous availability, there's no tolerable downtime. This is like Google. They have data centers all over the place. If one of them goes down, all the others can totally just take over instantly. Hard copy data is an option a lot of people like, since you don't, especially since ransomware came out. They're worried that all your electronic records can be trashed, and then you'll wish you actually had it printed on paper. So you have full backups. We talked about that, incremental and differential backup. You often have rotation of your tapes, and often something like this. We have 7 daily tapes and 4 tapes you save every week, like you save every Monday's tape forever, and every monthly tape you save. So you don't have a huge pile of tapes, but you can recover any time in the past. This sort of thing happens. Electronic vaulting, backing up your stuff over the internet, is quite popular. Services like Iron Mountain will do this. You want to encrypt it in transit, and you can have remote journaling or database shadowing to keep tracks of your database. And high availability options are just ways to create fault tolerance. So even when specific systems fail, you maintain availability. So active-active is the load balancing one we talked about before, where all your devices are running all the time. Active-passive is where you have backup devices that are not used until the main one goes down. Software escrow is another issue, probably more increasingly worth thinking about in this day of Internet of Things. What if the company goes out of business that designed your hardware or software and they're not maintaining it anymore? Then you can store the source code at a trusted third party is one way to work around this. So you can continue to maintain it yourself. And then to test your plan, you have to review it, where you just read through the plan to see if it's working. That's a review. Then you have a read-through where you list all the components, and a tabletop exercise. These are quite important. I was talking about this over the weekend at CPTC with other teachers, where you just talk through the steps. This is often considered very valuable. You don't actually touch any equipment, but you get to decide who's in charge of this, who's in charge of that, who should do this. That turns out to be a big issue. When a bad thing happens, nobody knows whose job it is to deal with it. And then you can carry out the recovery process. You can duplicate real business transactions on backup systems, or the most extreme, most thorough test where you actually interrupt real business. This is what Cloudflare does. The CEO of Cloudflare, I've seen him talk about this. He will go and pull the plug so the San Jose data center goes down completely, and test to see if the other stuff immediately takes over like it should. And he says you only lose one ping. It only takes 1 second for the other locations to take over, and that's what you want. But of course, you could cause a disaster with this if your stuff doesn't work. And that's kind of what Amazon did a few years back. Amazon went down for like 4 days, all their stuff, because they implemented a new system to do load balancing, and they got it backwards, so it put all the load on the most busy system, and it trashed their whole network for 4 days. So you got to practice using your emergency power, contacting all your people, informing people, have people aware of what the disaster recovery plan means for them. If they're not participating, they need to know, should I come into work or what? And you have to maintain it. You have to have your change management and team, and you have versions of this plan. And so here's common mistakes: not enough support. You don't involve all the important business units. You don't consider a wide enough scope. You don't consider communications, your supply chain, or you don't test it and keep it up to date. These are very common ways to do it wrong. And so some specific frameworks for this. NIST has a framework for the government systems. There's an international framework. There's a British standard and another international standard to supersede the old British standard. You know, these are part of our security plans. And there's a Business Continuity Institute that has these parts of their standard. So you might adhere to one of these international standards if you reach a high level of security maturity. Of course, small businesses usually have a much less formal procedure. All right, now let's take the last Kahoot here. All right. I know, they are pretty good, and sometimes they change. Yeah, that's why Kahoot is good. Kahoot makes it fun. The music is good, little pictures are fun. I made my own version one time, and mine was much more primitive, you know. When I taught like one of my first online classes, I made an online version of this, but mine was just very simple with little buttons, you know.
The worst thing about disaster recovery,
Yeah?
no one ever checks the tapes to see if the tapes are going to work for recovery.
That's why you have to test it. Yes, that happened at my company. They took the idiot that was always off smoking pot behind the trash can and put him in charge of the tapes, and he was never changing a tape. So we thought we had all these backups, but we didn't. That tends to happen. That's why you have to test your backups periodically to make sure they're actually working.
It's actually Dell's fault or HP. You need to like you prevent the machine, you just buy the hard drive, so all your personal data is on the system, and return the stuff after you're done with the store. That's Dell's mistake.
Could be, yeah. All right, so let's see here. All right, so which one of these has MTD of 0? That's continuous availability, like Cloudflare. One site goes down, the other takes over immediately. You don't have any service interruption at all. That's, of course, the most expensive, but you have maximum tolerable downtime of 0. All right, which system saves 2 identical copies of a database? That's shadowing, all right? All right, what DRP test is the most dangerous? That's, of course, complete business interruption. You turn off stuff during a business activity and see if the other stuff flawlessly takes over. And which one is not a common BCP error? Yeah, of course. Very few people test it much. All right, so, all right. Well, Brandon's won them all, I think. Oh, yeah, yeah. Let me just check this. That's what I thought. Brandon was 15. This is 9. Okay, good. And Jim W. is 3. All right, good. So I'll stop this.